Hey, bet you didn't think I made it today. Today is day 5. Um, this is the Jesus Freaks channel, and you are joining me for a chapter reading of John Eldredge's beautiful Outlaw. Again, today's day 5, so we're going to do chapter 5. It's kind of a long chapter, so looking at probably a good close to 20 to 30 minute reading. Today is chapter 5, the most human face of all. Now, all of this can begin to sound so lofty and noble that it ends up having an effect opposite from the one he intended. We begin to lose Jesus. He's already starting to drift back again heavenward into the rafters to take his place in the stained glass. For something has crept into our assumptions about Jesus that makes it almost impossible to relate to him, not to mention love him. I say crept because it has not been a conscious decision. Few of the things that shape our actual convictions are. I think much of the creep has happened, ironically, as a result of our attempts to love and revere Christ. But crept in this notion has done great damage to our perceptions of him, our experience of him. It's the notion that Jesus was really pretending when he presented himself as a man. We who worship Jesus hold fast to the belief that he was God, very God of very God, very God of very God, as the Nicene Creed states. The heroic actions and miraculous powers of Jesus' life attest to it. So when we read what we would call the more human moments, we feel that Jesus was sort of cheating. With a nod and a wink, we know that what's really happening is that Einstein has dropped in to take the first grade math quiz. Mozart is playing a measure in the kindergarten song flute choir. After all, we're talking about Jesus here. The guy walked on water, raised Lazarus from the dead. He never broke a sweat, right? Then what do you make of this terrible sweat in Gethsemane? They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death," he said to them. "Stay here and keep watch." Going a little further, he fell to the ground and prayed that if possible, the hour might pass from him. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me." And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. Mark 14:32-36, and Luke 22-44. Deeply distressed, overwhelmed with sorrow, anguished. This doesn't sound like somebody cheating to me. He begs his Father with tears that this awful cup might be taken from him. Please let there be some other way. He doesn't want to do it. Sweat like blood pouring from his tormented brow. He pleads with his Father. Then he pleads a second time, and then a third. Does this sound like Einstein adding two and two? Gethsemane was the most terrible farce if Jesus was faking it. He was human. Really. You recall the famous story of his trial in the wilderness. Well, at the end of those 40 days of fasting, he was hungry. Luke 4:2. On his way into Jerusalem one morning, he goes to have a look at a fig tree because he's hungry. Matthew 21:18. Many readers recall the encounter Jesus had with a woman at a well. The account says that Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about the 6th hour, and when a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" John 4:6-7. Wait, Jesus was hungry, tired, thirsty. Yep, that's what it says. He was human. The Gospels are filled with beautiful and haunting descriptions of the humanity of Jesus. One of the most poignant takes place when the report reaches him that his cousin has been guillotined. On Herod's birthday, the daughter of Herodias danced for them and pleased Herod so much that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she asked. Prompted by her mother, she said, "Give me here on a platter the head of John the Baptist." The king was distressed, but because of his oaths and his dinner guests, he ordered that her request be granted and had John beheaded in the prison. His head was brought in on a platter and given to the girl, who carried it to her mother. John's disciples came and took his body and buried it. Then they went and told Jesus. And when Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Matthew 14, 6-13. Jesus takes the boat, leaves the crowd behind, sails to some place he can be alone. The man who has unceasingly offered himself to others needs to get away. He needs room to grieve, just as you would. I cannot say this more emphatically. Life affected Jesus. We have spread so many ashes over the historical Jesus that we scarcely feel the glow of his presence anymore, lamented Brennan Manning. He is a man in a way that we have forgotten men can be. Truthful, blunt, emotional, non-manipulative, sensitive, compassionate. Jesus never did anything half-heartedly. When he embraced our humanity, he didn't pull a fast one by making a show of it. He embraced it so fully and totally that he was able to die. God can't die, but Jesus did. It will do your heart good to discover that Jesus shares in your humanity. He was, as the creeds insist, fully human. Yes, more than that, to be sure, but never less than that. I'm sure the chipmunks made him laugh. The Pharisees sure made him furious. He felt joy, weakness, sorrow. The more we can grasp his humanity, the more we will find him someone we can approach, know, love, trust, and adore. Let me assure you, I cling to the Nicene Creed and the Orthodox faith held by the Church for ages that Jesus was somehow God and man. A number of ridiculous books have been released in the last 100 years arguing that Jesus was merely a man, but a reaction in the other extreme is wrong as well. He is not Mozart playing with the kindergartners. We are not going to parse here the technicalities theologians have used to try to explain the mechanics of how he became human, yet remained God the Son. To try to dissect that now misses the point. Our little brains seem to be able to hold only one or two thoughts before us anyway. Right now, we are trying to recover his genuine humanity. Notice how the religious fog, even at this moment, is working to prevent you. This is disrespectful, maybe heresy. He's pushing his point too far. But now Jesus is ascended, so none of this matters. The more the dog barks, the closer you are to the bone. Jesus was tired, hungry, thirsty, because he took on our humanity. Read carefully. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. John 1:14. Since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared in their humanity. Hebrews 2:14. When the time came, he set aside the privileges of deity and took on the status of a slave, became human. Having become human, he stayed human. It was an incredibly humbling process. He didn't claim special privileges. Instead, he lived a selfless, obedient life and then died a selfless, obedient death. And the worst kind of death at that, a crucifixion. Philippians 2:7-8 from the Message. I mentioned earlier my anger in the museum at the classic art depicting the birth of Jesus as a super baby. I was angry not because the art was done badly, because it was done so beautifully, so very reverently, making it all the more difficult to remember that Jesus was human. The Incarnation is one of the greatest treasures of our faith. The world keeps pushing God away, feeling more comfortable with him up in the heavens somewhere. But in the coming of Jesus, he draws near, incredibly near. He takes on our humanity. How could he possibly get closer? He nurses at Mary's breast. One of my favorite Christmas meditations comes from this passage. From this passage by Chesterton. He's speaking of Bethlehem and what it held in its foothills that fateful night. The strange kings fade into a far country, and the mountains resound no more with the feet of the shepherds, and only the night and the cavern lie in a fold upon fold over something more human than humanity. Savor that passage for a moment. The manger Mary used as a bassinet held something more human than humanity. Do you think of Jesus as the most human being who ever lived? It's true. The ravages of sin, neglect, abuse, and 1,000 addictions have left us all a shadow of what we were meant to be. Jesus is humanity in its truest form. His favorite title for himself was the Son of Man, not of God, but of man. We looked to nature and saw reflected there his playfulness and his fierce intention. Do we see his humanity expressed in creation as well? Well, look in the mirror. You are the only thing in this world said to be created directly in his image. Your humanity is a reflection of Jesus' humanity. Jesus feels, you feel. Jesus longs, you long. Jesus weeps, you weep. Jesus laughs, you laugh. It's a pretty staggering thought. Too much heavens stuff pushes Jesus away. His humanity brings him close again. It also helps us recover his captivating personality in the Gospels. I've always wondered why Jesus, having healed someone, would immediately tell them to keep quiet about it. After giving 2 blind men perfect vision, Jesus warned them sternly, "See that no one knows about this." Matthew 9:30. Warned them sternly? Now why is that? Oh, excuse me. Now why is that? He does the same after healing a man of leprosy. Jesus sent him away once with a strong warning. See that you don't tell this to anyone. Mark 1:44. A strong warning? But isn't the point to get the word out? And wouldn't miracles be just the thing? These guys are the poster children, living proof of Jesus' claims. Maybe he's using reverse psychology, knowing that the more you insist people don't talk about what happened, the more they will. Is this merely his technique to get the press going? It certainly has that effect. 2 blind men went out and spread the news about him all over the region. Matthew 9:31. The healed leper went out and began to talk freely, spreading the news. Luke 1:45. But wait. Mark goes on to explain why Jesus did this. See that you don't tell this to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priests, and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing, as a testimony to them. Instead, he went out and began to talk freely, spreading the news. And as a result, Jesus could no longer enter a town openly, but stayed outside in lonely places. Yet the people still came to him from everywhere. Mark 1:44-45. It is a sad editorial footnote. Jesus can't even get a moment's rest now. The paparazzi are everywhere. He doesn't mind a night of prayer on the mountain, but never to be able to get a bed and a hot meal? Jesus' strong warnings reveal his strong desires, very human desires. Please don't tell anybody about this. He doesn't want to be forced to sleep in the woods. Jesus enjoyed people. Not everyone does, you know. Many stories find him feasting with a rowdy crowd. He invited 12 men to spend day and night with him for 3 years. His longing, my pages are sticking together. Sorry. His longing for companionship intensifies to a crescendo in Gethsemane. He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with him. "Stay here and keep watch with me." Matthew 26:37-38. "Don't leave me alone, not now." How urgently human. Yes, Jesus knew loneliness. He's not pretending. The one who cared, the one who created the human heart, whose own heart was so kind and so vast, this man felt deeply. He who created love and friendship longed for it. Now, these are defenders of the faith, quite vocal in our time, quite convincing in their zeal to protect the glory of God. Who will attack you for suggesting that God wants anything from you other than obedience? To suggest so in their reasoning is to diminish the all-sufficiency of God. But is that what you see in Gethsemane? A God who couldn't care less whether his friends stay or go? "Stay here and keep watch with me." This is no superhero steeled and impervious to the human condition. Far from it. And loneliness is something we all share with him. "The whole conviction of my life," wrote Thomas Wolfe, "now rests upon the belief that loneliness, far from being a rare and curious phenomenon, peculiar to myself and to a few other solitary men, is the central and inevitable fact of human existence. To be missed or understood, to be judged unfairly, to be wanted for what you can do rather than who you are, to go on for years unappreciated, even unknown by those closest to you." You can hear the pain of being missed in the midst of Jesus' famous words in John 14. "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. In my Father's house there are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I'm going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you may also be where I am." Philip said, "Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us." Jesus answered, "Don't you know me, Philip, even after I have been among you for such a long time?" John 14:1-9. Here at the very moment Christ is doing all he can to comfort his disciples and prepare them for his coming execution, he not only assures them that all will be well, but he promises their companionship will continue for eternity. In this moment of relational assurance, his closest disciples betray how little they know Jesus, and you can see it hurts him. "Don't you know me? Even after I've been among you for such a long time." You can practically see the pain in his eyes. Imagine living your entire life in a world where the people closest to you don't get you. Oh, you do live in that world, and Jesus understands. No, I don't believe that Jesus was always lonely. There are moments of remarkable tenderness recorded in the Gospels. John leaning on his breast at the Last Supper, Mary washing his feet with her tears, wiping them with her hair. I'm sure there were many more, all the time walking the roads with the fellas, all those campfires. I do not believe that his loneliness defined him, as it does many of us. Jesus is an essentially happy man. He loves life. How could the joy of the Lord be our strength if the Lord is seldom joyful? You might think that keeping Jesus all mysterious and heavenly is the proper thing to do, but consider this. When he came as presented in the Gospels, very much human, a person, a man with a very distinct personality. This is the primary witness we have of him, recorded for all of who would know him. This is how he chooses to make himself known. This is the self he presents to us. Be careful you don't push him away with your religious delicacies. Jesus was so obviously human, notes Eugene Peterson. But this has never been an easy truth for people to swallow. There are always plenty of people walking around who will have none of this particularity. Human ordinariness, bodily fluids, raw emotions of anger and disgust, fatigue and loneliness. Perhaps you thought Gethsemane was the only time he sweat? Or maybe we assume his sweat smelled like lilies. And what is with the snowy white robe? Every movie I've seen costumes Jesus in an immaculate white robe. He never got dirty? Those were not paved roads he walked for miles. You shall know them by their fruit. Jesus' humanity will cause you to fall in love with him all the more. His personality, his remarkable qualities, those we have touched on, those we are about to explore, they burst with color and brilliance like fireworks because of his humanity. Think of it. The man of sorrows had a sense of humor. The Prince of Peace could work himself into a lather. This wonderful counselor could be downright ironic. The man on a mission had time to sit and chat. Far from diminishing Jesus, this will only quicken your worship and deepen your intimacy. I love his playfulness. I love his courage. I love his exasperation. To what can I compare this generation? They are all like children sitting in the marketplace calling out to others. We played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We sang a dirge, and you did not mourn. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, they say he's a glutton and a drunkard and a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Matthew 11:16-19. He's got to be shaking his head, rolling his eyes. What is it with you people? You're simply impossible. John fasted. You thought he was possessed. I feasted. You think I'm an alcoholic and a pig. There's simply no pleasing you. Or how about Jesus' surprise? Yes, his genuine surprise. When Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, asking for help. Lord, he said, my servant lies at home paralyzed and in terrible suffering. Jesus said to him, I will go and heal him. The centurion replied, Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. But just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. And when Jesus heard this, he was astonished, and said to those following him, I tell you the truth, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. Matthew 8:5-10. Astonished, variously translated as also marveled or amazed. Matthew uses the exact same word a few paragraphs later to describe the disciples' slack-jawed reaction when Jesus shuts down a storm. Lord, save us, we're going to drown. He replied, you of little faith, why are you so afraid? Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, what kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him? Matthew 8:25-27. Amazed, astonished. Did you know Jesus could be amazed? Mark uses the word to describe Jesus' amazement at the Jews' unbelief. He was amazed at their lack of faith, from 6:6 of Matthew. The religious glaze over Jesus, or over our hearts, is so thick we have to keep striking it. Over and over, Jesus was human. Jesus was a man. His humanity was real. He wasn't pretending. Those nails actually hurt. I can sense the religious trying one more dupe. Yes, but he's not human now. He's at the right hand of the Father in glory. The disciples were tempted to think something similar. Late Resurrection Sunday, the two fellows from Emmaus Road came along, rushing back to town to tell the others what they've seen. Jesus is alive. Let's pick up the story there. While they were still talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." They were startled and frightened, thinking that they saw a ghost. He said to them, "Why are you troubled? And why do doubts arise in your minds? Look at my hands and feet. It is I myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones, but as you see, I have." When he had said this, he showed them his hands and feet. And while they still did not believe it because of joy and amazement, he asked them, "Do you have anything here to eat?" And they gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate it in their presence. Luke 24:36-43. This is a very funny moment. The pair from the Emmaus Road are in the middle of telling their incredible story when Jesus just appears in the room as if to illustrate everything they've said. Yep, that was me. Yep, I did it just like that. Suddenly, he's just standing there, and all he says is, "Peace be with you." Here, the most fantastic thing in the whole world is happening before their eyes, and all Jesus says is, "Hi." His understatement is very, very funny. The disciples are stupefied, dumbfounded. They don't believe that he is real. Look at my hands and feet. He is clearly showing them the holes, the nails pierced. They still think he's a ghost. And finally he asks, "Is there anything here to eat?" Like a neighbor dropping by for some chips. He chews it carefully in front of them, swallows it, waits a few seconds for everyone to digest the lesson. You gotta love this moment and the point he's making. Jesus raised it. It's still Jesus, a man, flesh and bones and all. Be gone, religious fog. Jesus was more human than humanity. His was the most human face of all. This is going to open up wonders for you. Well, I was so close. 27 and a half minutes. Told you between 25 and 30, I think. Again, that was chapter 5 of John Eldredge's beautiful Outlaw. Come back tomorrow for chapter 6, The Extravagant Generosity.